Hey y'all, I'm music journalist Thomas Mooney. Welcome back to New Slang. This is episode 158, where I am joined by singer-songwriter Aaron Lee Tasjan. At the end of this week, Friday, February 5th, Aaron is releasing his new album, Tasjan, which, don't quote me, but I believe that's also just considered a self-titled, but I guess not nearly as cool. Also, for the record, I don't believe it's a Beetlejuice situation either. Aaron will not magically appear when you are talking about the record in conversation. But speaking of spectacular, this new album from Aaron has been one of my go-tos for this early year. For those unfamiliar with Aaron, he's released a handful of solo albums the past few years. That would be In the Blazes, Silver Tears, and 2018's Karma for Cheap. They all fall in line in this what I would consider like the cosmic folk rock sound world. One of the giant elements for this album has been the spacey vibes. Go watch the music videos for Up All Night, Computer of Love, and Don't Overthink It. You'll get what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna borrow that space analogy for a second. What I've really liked about listening to Aaron's albums over the years have been how they all feel very specific and distinct. They're like planets within the Aaron Lee Tasjan solar system, and they all have like these unique palettes. They may share some general qualities, of course, because, a sunset on planet In the Blazes and a sunset on Karma for Cheap, they're gonna, at the end of the day, be sunsets, but they're gonna be going through these different lenses. Or I guess a more apt description would be that they're going through different atmospheres, and each of these records have like a little bit of a different atmospheric touch. And on this new album, you feel this shift. We're probably still rooted deep down in this like cosmic folk and rock vibe, but we're really picking up on the glam and the psychedelic and this sugary sweet blend of pop rock. It's the Beatles, but it's like the White Album. He also taps into this Elliott Smith kind of world. Everyone always thinks that Elliott Smith as like the quiet singer-songwriter type because they just kind of automatically go to Either Or and like Miss Misery from the Good Will Hunting soundtrack, which of course I love that version of Elliott Smith, but also go check out XO and Figure 8. That's more what I'm talking about in comparison to what Aaron's doing here. There's a little bit more happening. Oh, and I'm probably going to be the only one to say this, but I'm okay being on this island by myself. It really happens on the song Don't Overthink It, so that's probably like the best example. But I really pick up on a lot of these like Rodney Crowell vibes. It's very much in Aaron's voice and his delivery. I don't know, you kind of feel like that open jangle that Rodney had like in like the Diamonds and Dirt era. Maybe just a smidge, but I don't know, it's still there. Anyway, I think y'all are going to enjoy this conversation. We cover a lot of ground, lament about live shows and gatherings and the writing process and the writing of this record. Today's presenting partner is our pals over at Desert Door Texas Soto. If you're asking yourself what exactly Desert Door or a Soto is, well, it's a premium, high-quality spirit that is similar to a tequila or a mezcal, but in my estimation, it's more refined, smooth, and fragrant. It has a distinct and intriguing palate that picks up on hints of vanilla and citrus while maintaining a healthy earthiness that is quite enjoyable. One of my favorite features about Desert Door is just how versatile it really is. If you want to feel fancy and a little highbrow, it's perfect for a variety of cocktails that call for lime wedges and coarse salt, chopped ginger, agave nectar, sprigs of thyme and sticks of cinnamon. If you're down to muddle some fresh fruit, all that kind of stuff, it's perfect. It's great for experimentation and fine-tuning all of your mixologist skills. And then also, if you're a little bit more down home and casual, you got that denim jacket on. It's just perfect for those short and sweet, simple go-to favorites that hit the mark every time. I'm talking about ranch waters and Moscow mules and palomas and Mexican Coca-Cola with Desert Door. What I love so much about Desert Door is just how genuine and authentically West Texan they are as well. They go out and harvest Soto plants out in the wild and are aware and knowledgeable conservationists at heart. So next time you're at your neighborhood liquor store, get yourself a bottle of Desert Door. I'll throw a link into the show notes for more information. All right, one last thing before we get to the interview. If this is your first time listening to New Slang, let's do the obvious and hit that subscribe button. Give it a 5-star review over on iTunes. If you're into 90s country conversations, go subscribe to my other podcast called The Neon Eon. It's just about 90s country. I started it the first week of this year, so we're just 4 episodes in. Those first 4, they're with Clay Walker, Pam Tillis, Gretchen Peters, and Porter Howe of Little Texas. It's out every Wednesday. And if you're into reading, I am a writer as well. Have some features and interviews over on Holler. This week, there's a new Q&A with one of my favorite up-and-coming artists in that Americana country world, Bella White. She was episode 150 on here as well. So yeah, it's over on holler.country. Go check out the New Slang merch store, all t-shirts, koozies, and the usual. They are all on sale right now, which when people usually do that, they're making way for new merch to come in. So I'm just saying that's probably true here as well. Go check out the Patreon if you're wanting more New Slang and Neon Eon content. All those links, as well as the social media platforms that you know and love, but not really. Those are all going to be in the show notes. All right, enough of the self-promotion. Here is Aaron Lee Tasjan. You have this new record coming out just pretty shortly here at the beginning of February. And it's one of those things where we're still in the midst of this strangeness with the pandemic and everything. And I think a lot of this record, I don't know necessarily if there's a lot of intentions as far as writing about like a lot of feelings that you can relate to this past year that ended up being in this record, but I think you can definitely apply a lot of that stuff to what we're all feeling like as far as the anxieties and the worriedness of the past year. You can apply a lot of that. You can pick out a lot of that from this new record. What is was that part of the plan, or was that just something that, human nature, we just kind of see those patterns and apply them to our lives?
Yeah, that's interesting how that happens, how songs become true sometimes, you know what I mean? Obviously, particularly in this case, but oftentimes, is the case that it becomes true in a way that you didn't really expect, and, when I was just sitting in my bedroom, in 2019, writing lines like, the world outside my window looks just like Nintendo, it's interesting how that made it onto a record that's ended up coming out right as we're sort of reckoning with all these systems, these systems that have been gamed to, purposely put, poor people and Black people and gay people and women and, all these different types of people at a disadvantage, and so all you can say about that as a songwriter is just there's no way that you could have done it intentionally, because to me, songwriting is just sort of my way of checking in with my subconscious, a lot of times, I don't even realize what the song is about until later. And other writers that I talk to seem to feel similarly. So it's not an intentional thing, but you are tapping into something, you know what I mean? It's weird, how everybody will sort of have the same idea at once. I was talking to Adam Wiener from Low Cut Connie yesterday, and we both figured out we both have a song on our new album called Now You Know, just totally randomly. We both had that idea at the same time. And, I remember reading an interview one time with Beck, who's an artist that I really admire, and he was talking about going to a recording session that Pharrell was going to produce some music for him, and he was with his manager on the way over to the session, and his manager said, how many songs do you think you have written? And Beck said, well, I don't really have too many written because I wanted to kind of write them with Pharrell, but I just know that I want to do some music that's really happy, And when they got to the studio, Pharrell said, "Hey, before we get started, I want to play you this new song I just finished. It's called Happy." You know what I mean? Like, these things are just like out there, and they happen, and people fall on them at the same time, and I think like the magnitude of what we're facing right now is such that like it would suggest that it is an energy that's pulling all of us, So I know a lot of other songwriters that can relate to the same thing of having written songs before any of this happened that somehow seem to like relate really well to the way that everybody's feeling right now.
Yeah. Like what I always wonder is, as a journalist listening to these records, you're obviously wanting to like put yourself in the perspective of that artist and see hopefully get what they're saying out of these songs. And a lot of times I wonder if like what I get out of the song says more about me than sometimes like what the artist's intentions originally were. You know what I'm saying? Because like, obviously, like I see a lot of, a lot of these songs, they feel like, you're stuck inside, right? You're looking through that window, and you touch on like the anxiety of just like social media. Like obviously like that song, Computer of Love, like the Avatar stuff, and like the I'm gonna butcher this word because I always have trouble with it, but like the anonymity of being online, and I don't know, like it's you get what I'm saying as far as like sometimes you wonder like it's one, I guess, like that whole you stare into the abyss, then the abyss stares back at you kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is we all want to see ourselves in each other, because it helps us to feel connected. And a big part of music for me is connection. It's a huge part of why I write songs. I want to feel more connected to the world around me, to, the people around me, but also, to myself, like, so, I try really hard to like, maintain curiosity about all those things and put that into the songs, because I do think that's something that people relate to, so it's something that the artist wants, to feel connected. But it's something that the audience wants too. So it's in music, like that's a really like mutually beneficial situation, and it's, I think, in a lot of ways, like whether people realize it or not, it's what drives, the passion that still exists for music. I mean, you think like after all these years, people would go like, oh, a guy like, singing, a song and playing the piano, or, oh, a woman, shredding a guitar solo and singing a badass rock song or whatever. Like we've seen this before, but they don't. Like they're just as happy, as ever to be excited about Annie Clark, as they were to be, excited about, Lita Ford when she was, doing amazing things with the guitar, or whatever. So it's, I think like, the conditions are right, for the audience, and for the artist, and that's why it works,
Mm-hmm. This episode of New Slang is brought to you by the Blue Light Live here in Lubbock, Texas. Blue Light has undoubtedly been my home away from home over the years and has played such a vital role, not only for my development as a journalist, but obviously it's been one of the foundational pieces for a lot of your favorite songwriters and bands who have made it out of the Lubbock area over the years. And of course, as a music venue, they've played such a pivotal role for a lot of your favorite bands just in general. One of my favorite parts about Blue Light is just how versatile the place can truly be. I've seen it crowded and rowdy on a Saturday night for a rock and roll band, And I've seen it dead still on a Wednesday when a legendary singer-songwriter rolls through town. What you should do is go over to bluelightlubbock.com and check out all the new merch they've added. Hats, t-shirts, both short and long sleeve. They also have hoodies and koozies, and just added some sweatshirts that are very much an homage to the college sweatshirt that John Belushi wore in Animal House. And then, of course, maybe the crown jewel of their new merch is the Varsity Club style jacket in blue satin. I got one the other day, and yeah, it's just one of my favorite things I own now. And yeah, I don't know, I just love it. Anyway, you can check out all of their new merch over at bluelightlubbock.com. As always, I'll throw a link into the show notes for easy access. Okay, let's get back to the show. Yeah, and I think that I think there has to be something too where, I don't know, like there's only X amount of like general stories out there. If we want to get like real, I think like Radney Foster one time when I was talking to him on a podcast, not to name drop, but had mentioned, like there's kind of like two general types of songs, and that's like the love song and then like finding religion. And you can kind of like put songs into those two different points as far as like, it's either a heartbreak song or a love song, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with someone else, but about something else. Or there is like, and
right.
I guess like what my point is that, no matter what it is, like no one's like reinventing the wheel or inventing the wheel.
Right.
It's more like you're tapping into like, and putting your own perspective on it, and all those little perspectives, is like why, like the fandom needs it, like why fan bases need, they're seeking the same stories, I guess, you know what I'm saying? But like, it depends on like whose perspective, like they tap into that applies best for them, I guess. I know it's like really long winded, but
No. I know. I think that's true though, and, it's, you like, it's always interesting to me, like when artists talk about their influences, because, a lot of times, like, that's where you can like really see, a little bit of what you're talking about. I think, you take an artist like Phoebe Bridgers, for example, who, claims Elliott Smith is a big influence, but I can hear that in her music, but I can also like hear the parts of her, what she's done with that, and where she's taking that. And I think that, like, that's what's cool about it. Like, music is kind of like science. Like, you're expanding upon the existing knowledge,
right.
And if you, and if you do it right, you can do it in a way, just like you can in science, like with a really cool science project, like you can present music, like that in a way that will really dazzle people, but it does require a thoughtful approach. And I think it also requires like at least some, knowledge and or respect for like the history that came before you.
Yeah, like I think that comes with obviously like the experience, right? Because
Yeah, for sure.
At the beginning, you're kind of, at least like what I've seen in a lot of songwriters is, at that initial stage of whenever you're learning the instrument and you're starting to write, you can write like just at a clip that is like you're just constantly writing because like it's something new.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times those songs may feel like, that's like when you're mimicking all those influences, but it's once you get used to it all and you kind of get that out of your system and you become like finding yourself, that's whenever I guess like that you become yourself as a writer.
Yeah. Well, because you see, I think you start to see like how what you have to say can be a part of the conversation, you know, because I think first you have to figure out what it is that you have to say, you know, and then like, you know, once you kind of know, like, you know, where you're coming from, you know, you can take something that's already existed and like, you know, add to the conversation, you know, as opposed to just sort of like what you were saying before, just sort of more copying it or, you know, imitating it, if you will. You know, I mean, I guess Bob Dylan, you know, kind of said it best in a lot of ways. It's sort of funny, but like, it's true, you know, it's like, you know, a good artist imitates, a great artist steals, you know, or whatever.
Right.
Because you are stealing a technique, you know, you're taking something and making it your own, you know, so, you know, you're taking something that belongs to somebody else and making it your own, you know, but like, I don't look at it as stealing. Like I look at it as being like a part of the canon, you know, and a part of the ongoing conversation.
Yeah. Because like, for example, whenever this record of yours was sent over, you know, I put it on and I'm listening and it's like, oh yeah, you can obviously, and this is something that you've always kind of had, but you know, this record, you pick up on a lot of the Beatles vibes or those Elliott Smith vibes. And
yeah,
like, it's not necessarily like where if I was telling someone, oh, that right there was exactly from, and then insert, you know, like where that was taken from or, you know, or whatever.
Right.
It's just,
totally.
It's more of the mood or the feel. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's like, that is part of, you know, creating an aesthetic. Like, okay, let me give you an example of like, sound is really hard to talk about, right? Music is kind of difficult to talk about because the ways that people describe it, one person's like, you know, crunchy or like, you know, swampy or whatever, you know, could be something completely different for somebody else, you know, like these kind of descriptions are like it makes it hard to nail down, you
right.
know.
Yeah, you're like talking in the abstract.
Yeah, you know, and so really like all you can really go back to is like the, you know, the music itself, you know, that's where the truth is. So like there was a guy who was really upset, like had watched one of our music videos, and he was really upset. He kept saying something that I thought was quite interesting. He felt that I had stolen Tom Petty's craft, which I just found fascinating. Like you can't, that wouldn't be possible to do. You know, somebody's craft, that's something that they achieve through years and years of work of writing these songs like over and over again. You know what I mean? Like I could never like decide that I wanted to have Guy Clark's craft. You know what I mean? Like, man, I'm just going to like get up tomorrow and like write like these incredible songs that everybody loves. You know what I mean? Like that's not, you know, if that was possible, of course, like everybody would do it, but it's not like, you know, so I think what he actually meant to say is that like, you know, he felt like I was borrowing too much from Tom's aesthetic. But if you look at that, like you have to then look, you know, at the source, you know, itself and go like, okay, well, what about Tom's aesthetic? Did he ever borrow? You know, well, of course, you know, and then let's go back even further, you know, let's go back and look at, you know, a guy like Robert Plant. You know, you wonder if this guy who was so upset about me borrowing Tom Petty's craft had ever heard Steve Marriott sing You Need Lovin', you know, before he heard Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin. You know what I mean?
Right.
This kind of musical, you know, kind of borrowing is a part of the tradition of music. You know what I mean? And like, let's get real. Like, I mean, certainly, the conversations, his point that he's trying to make, like when you compare that to, the amount of, black artists that we've, overlooked or, can't, really tell, the true story of what they invented, of what they actually have ownership over musically. You kind of just go like, man, like, you're not even your head's not even in the game, man. Like, you have a lot more thinking to do, or whatever. I know that my music, reminds people of other things, and as does all of the music that I was influenced by and loved, I could, for me, I could hear, where, when I was listening to, the Replacements or something, like I could hear how that reminded me of Big Star, and then I could hear how Big Star reminded me of, other, people that I loved, Emmett Rhodes and, and stuff like that, and like, and all this music connected to me, like, right up to like the Jayhawks and stuff like that. So like when people like try to like say like, what genre are you or whatever, like that's always going to be a difficult question for an artist like me to answer, because I never thought of music in terms of a genre. I just thought of all of these things being connected through the thread of American music, So, I think it's tough. These conversations become difficult to have because not everybody has the knowledge and like not everybody knows the history. So a lot of times, like, you're trying to convince somebody of something, that they have no context for, and that's, as we found out, like in America too, and politically, like the last 4 years, like that can be a really big challenge. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I love like the genre conversation because I can understand it on both sides. Cause
Sure.
I think like, obviously that, the radio DJ or like the A&R man is kind of like the one who like invented the genre label, because it's like, you can't explain to explain someone's, an artist, you have to provide all that context, and
totally.
And it's always one of those things where, the guy who meets you before the show who wants to know what kind of music you play, he doesn't have time for like the 30-minute conversation about, the what you play. And, so then we end up with like these, these goofy kind of genre labels, or, like some of them have like lost their entire meaning, or like maybe they didn't have meaning to begin with. But this episode of New Slang is brought to you by Hot Damn Coffee. Rolling in from the hills of eastern Tennessee is Hot Damn Coffee. It's a down-home company that roasts single-origin, high-quality coffees from around the world. Their year-round roasts come from certified farms in Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Nicaragua. Check out the Hot Damn website over at hotdamn.coffee. There you can find more info on their operation and roasting process, and some helpful tips on how to brew the best cup of coffee. They've certainly made my mornings that much better. And to be perfectly honest, I enjoy a nice cup of coffee at all hours of the day. Some of my favorites have been the Tanzanian pea berry in medium roast, and the medium roast of Nicaraguan with the honey process. While there, check out their Hot Damn Coffee Club, which is a monthly subscription service. With the holiday season coming upon us, it's just really kind of the perfect gift. I don't care how difficult or easy a person is to shop for, they'll always be good with items like high quality coffee. And of course, right now, if you throw in the promo code SLANG in all caps, that's SLANG, you'll get 20% off your order. And if you're signing up for the Coffee Club subscription service, they'll take 20% off that first month and also throw in a bonus 8-ounce bag of their Nicaraguan coffee. Again, that's SLANG in all caps. Head over to hotdamn.coffee and sign up today. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, I want to go back to what you mentioned about Led Zeppelin because I like the borrowing aspect because
Yeah, sure.
you know, like I love Led Zeppelin and you know, when I first heard them, like anyone, you're just kind of like blown away by holy shit, what is this, right? And
yeah,
at some point like early on, I realized, hey, like especially like that first record, if you go back even on like just the songwriting credit aspect of it, you know, you can trace those songs to where like, I can't remember at one time I knew all this stuff, but like I think it's like a 10-song record and like 8 of the 10 songs were like based off of other songs or like just, you know, covers essentially. And early on at that time, it kind of, for me, like broke Led Zeppelin for me as far as like, oh, well, you know, like, this means they're not as good as insert another band because all of their music sounds like it just came out of nowhere. And
right.
I guess like I had a hard time like reasoning with that. And then of course like now like I don't necessarily think in those terms anymore, but yeah, it's one of those things where you're always kind of, as you said, like you're building off of the past, and that's just a constant kind of thing. Like there would be no progression if it was if we were always constantly having to start over.
Right, man. I mean, that, you know, this is the thing. It's like you wonder, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, do the guys at Pitchfork realize, like, you know, that there's a historical context for every single thing like they've ever written about. You know what I mean? Like nothing is new, you know, and like, you know, it's all, you know, Noel Gallagher says like every artist is like at best, you know, sort of an amalgamation of their own record collection, you know, and some people might have more obscure record collections than other people, but like, you know, that it doesn't make, you know, a band like Grizzly Bear any more original than a band like Greta Van Fleet. Like, I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
Oh man, Greta Van Fleet. Yeah. I guess they have a new record coming out soon. Something like that.
They do. Yeah. So, I heard one of the songs on the radio the other day.
Yeah. Yeah. I've not heard, I guess like I heard that first record, but you know, it's, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole of, what I want to go back to is, you know, you mentioned how like when you're kind of like in the moment of writing a song, you're not necessarily like, you don't have like the grand perspective on it. You haven't been able to like step away from it and go, oh, you know, like this is really touching on this as well.
Sure.
Is that something that like even you can't have in the headspace while you're in the writing process? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's different ways to approach it, you know, and like everybody has their own way of you know, kind of getting to the end of the rainbow, I guess. But I felt like I got into a bad habit for a while where I would start editing lyrics and things too quickly, almost trying to like give the song direction like too early on. I think, you know, it really works best, you know, when you just, you know, spit it out how it is, however it's coming to you, and don't think about it too much, you know, and then, you know, over time, like, you know, let the song tell you like what needs to be changed and reworked and like all that kind of stuff. Cause you sort of know when you're singing it, like, you know, a certain line comes up and you're just sort of like, or, you know, or you might be, you know, you might be like thinking about singing it or something like that, or how to sing it or something. Like if I ever get into any of those spots, like that feels dangerous to me, you know, because it's like, you know, you really just want to like go up there and not be thinking anything, you know. You know, I try to like always steer it in a direction where it feels like it's flowing, you know, and then, you know, the editing, you know, process does inevitably come most of the time. But I figured out you can't start editing or changing something like before you've really gotten to know it or even know like what it is, you know? So I was kind of just getting ahead of myself, I felt like.
Yeah. Like I definitely can relate to that as far as being a music journalist where, you know, you do get in this thing where sometimes you go, oh, that's, you're not wanting to say that right there, but just leave it because like you're almost like micromanaging it at that point. And,
sure.
You know, yeah, you can always erase something later. And
Right.
I've had too many damn times where, you know, I've thought of something that I want to say about something and then like never wrote it down and then just kind of forget about it, like, even though it was 5 minutes ago, and you just can't figure it, you can't find out, like, you can't, it's like you forgot the code or something, you know?
Oh, totally, man. I've been there before for sure.
Are you like a pen and pad type of guy, or are you like on like a laptop or something as far as like when you're writing stuff?
A lot of times it's mostly like handwritten still. I've written a few songs this year where I have just like come up with like a riff and a melody idea or some chords and a melody that I like, and I'll just turn on my voice memo and just totally improvise lyrics, which is, that's been kind of fun and like exciting because it's sort of thrilling in a way. It's like trying to think of you know, something to rhyme, and then, you know, you can obviously like you can play with like, you know, the rhyme scheme and stuff like that. And so to kind of do that on the fly, it's like some really cool, like mental gymnastics sort of. So it's, you know, it's fun. Like it's hard to get any adrenaline playing music right now because there's nobody to play for, you know? So like in a way, like that's kind of fun because it kind of, you know, it is a little more daring. Like it provides some opportunities for me to fall on my face, which I love. You know, I've done that, but I have notebooks, you know, all kinds of different notebooks that I just carry around with me, and I'm always writing things in. And a lot of times, like, none of those things are actual songs themselves, but I'll just go back through them because a lot of times I'll find lines for things that will either inspire a new song or fit into a song that I'm trying to finish.
Right.
So, you know, I just carry around like, you know, I've like, you know, 4 or 5 different notebooks that I've had for like the last like 2 years really, that are all, you know, probably mostly full at this point, but, you know, I even have boxes of like, you know, stuff from years ago that I still keep, just cause you never know. But, I think when you're a writer, it's like you know, it's like, it's easy to be sort of, like a little bit of a hoarder like that because you're collecting things, you know, you're like collecting all these like lines and, you know, story ideas and images and like, you know, and memories, you know, to be used for, you know, future inspirations and stuff like that. So, you end up, you know, like me with a closet floor full of boxes of old pieces of paper.
Yeah. The hoarding aspect of my life is like books and records and like,
yeah.
If you just even look at like my Mac, there's way too much
Totally
music as far as like just trying to get everyone's discography. That's like a big thing for me. And then obviously like just having like too many like Evernote notes and stuff like that, Google Docs.
Sure.
Yeah. What I found that really interesting, what you were talking about as far as like not having that adrenaline rush because of the lack of a crowd to test the song out, essentially, right? To show off.
Mm-hmm.
I've not really even thought about that. Yeah.
Because, you know, here's the thing, like live, I mean, for a band like, you know, what I like to do live anyway, you know, you really push the song to its limits, you know, and we never would play songs the same way, you know, and people liked that, you know. And sometimes we would play really long guitar jammy type versions of songs. And then other times, you know, we would play that same song and do a really short, you know, fast, like super, like almost country punk version, you know, or something like that. It was all about the mood of the room, you know, and, you know, having a bunch of people in there and like being able to look in their eyes and like, you know, kind of go like, oh, it feels like they're ready to like, you know, to eat each other. Like, let's play something like crazy right now, you know, let's cover Now I Want to Be Your Dog or something like that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, man, it looks like, you know, this is a perfect time to like, you know, everybody like just go, you know, smoke a cigarette. I'm just going to play like a little 3-song folk set, you know, in the middle of the show here, just solo, you know, or whatever. And so you really got to take the songs through their paces that way, you know, and really test like the limits of what, you know, they could do and what they could be and how many ways they could exist and like all that kind of stuff. And, you know, to me, like that's when, you know, you've got a song really, you know, it's if you can play it by yourself or play it with the band or play it on piano or play it on guitar or like whatever, you know, and have people, you know, engage, you know, and feel something from it, you know, each time, like, you know, that's when you have a song, you know, cause it's proven itself to be able to stand up to the test of like all those different environments and still work, you know, and it's hard, you know, it's like, it's just hard to get that sort of mood going on. Like you said, like looking at a tiny screen, trying to like squint and see the comments, like, you know, that people are writing, you know?
Yeah. Want to break one more time to talk about our pals over at Desert Door and offer a handful of my favorite go-tos. By no means am I an experienced mixologist or bartender or anything like that, but these have been super easy to make and great ways to unwind in the evening. Let's start off by upping your ranch water game a little bit by subbing Desert Door in. I'm a simple man. I just kind of take a Topo Chico, take a couple of drinks out, add some Desert Door, and top it off with a few lime wedges. I'm actually pretty big on the Palomas now too. What I'll do is take some Desert Door, some grapefruit juice, a dash of agave nectar, and some fresh lime juice. And I'm kind of big on lime, so I'll throw in another wedge or two when I pour it over some ice. And actually, I'll do the exact same thing, but I'll substitute some pineapple for the grapefruit for a change up. And now that the weather is dipping down, I've started having a Desert Door version of a hot toddy. Put some Door and some honey together and give it a mix. Add in an Earl Grey tea bag with some boiling hot water. Let it just sit for a minute. Remember, patience is a virtue. And then of course, I'll squeeze in a little bit of lemon just to have that balance. Anyway, Desert Door, it's as versatile as vodka and more refined, smooth, and complex than tequila. It's rich and balanced, so whatever your go-to is, it'll do the trick. For more info on Desert Door, check the show notes. All right, back to the episode. I was talking with someone about like with all the Instagram shows and stuff like that, where, you know, they were talking about how, I guess like it's one of those things where if I just told you, hey, set up an Instagram show, you would kind of generally know how to do it, but then it's like also just actually doing it, you kind of go, oh, actually I need to do this and this and this too, and how about the lighting and the sound and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, they were watching a lot of YouTube videos and getting like their setup just perfect kind of thing. And like, you know, they're playing a live Facebook stream show and they lean in after a song. And one of the comments here from someone was saying that the sound was shitty. And it was like, I guarantee you it's because you're listening on your iPhone or whatever it is and not what we're doing in the room. Yeah. That's been
totally,
just a weird aspect of all of this. I think that the energy of the room of a live performance, I think we almost always think about, you kind of think about those moments where it is the intimacy of a room when you're able to like slow it down and like play that acoustic set and everyone, the proverbial pin drop. But I think like the underrated thing is like the opposite of that. When it is that, there's so many people in there that you end up like getting you're feeding off of that live energy as far as it kind of being a little bit louder and, the crowd's a little bit amped up and there's just something else. Sometimes it's like too sweaty, all of that kind of stuff, all the stuff that you would love to complain about, too many people are too close to you and you're able to like get that kind of energy, for lack of a better term, like that rock and roll energy off of that room.
Man, I'm so with you on that. Like, I'm thinking right now of this gig that we played in Kentucky one time. It was a festival called the Moonshiners Ball, and it'd been heavy thunderstorms that weekend. And we went on at like 9:00 that night and, it was underneath a tent and it was just mud everywhere. And the stage was covered in mud and I had on these high-heeled boots. So I was just sliding all over the place, but I just made it part of the show. I just started doing, every dance move I could think of that had a slide in it, and it was the summertime in Kentucky. So it was really hot, and we were covered in sweat and we had to stop in the middle of the show because there was more, lightning and thunderstorms and stuff. And, people, and we drank moonshine, with people in their trucks, like, while we were waiting to go back on. And then we got too drunk. And I don't think actually we even were allowed to go back on because of the storms. But, those kind of things, like that to me, like, even though the show got canceled halfway through, because there was too much electricity in the air, that's what the fuck I'm talking about, like, give me too much electricity, man, like that to me, that's what's missing sometimes, from the rock and roll of today. It's like, you can't be too worried about, can't be too concerned about being cool. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I was
going
to
say.
Can't
be too concerned about looking, about not looking sweaty, or not having your boots covered in mud or not getting electrocuted. That's no way to rock and roll. So, I'm in favor of all that kind of stuff myself.
Yeah. The looking too cool thing. Yeah.
Totally, man.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. That's always one of those things where like, I'm not really like an animated person when I'm out. I'm more of a wallflower, but, I always think it's like such a, like, I'm not one of those people who needs to be in the middle of the crowd, but I think like that, those people need to be there always. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that, that energy, like, so I live here in Lubbock and, my favorite venue here is this place called the Blue Light. And, here in Lubbock, up to like 5 years ago, you could smoke in bars and like you really like absolutely kind of hate that thing because at the end of the night, you're like, oh man, my jacket smells like smoke now and all that kind of stuff. But I still kind of get nostalgic when thinking about those days because of you walked out and your jacket smelled like smoke and your hair was all smoky and like, all of that stuff adds to that room. And those rooms are important. And I don't know, like it's one of those things where I think here in the next, hopefully within this next year, we're able to appreciate those rooms again. And I think like people will, because like it's been something that's lacking in their lives.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to that certainly, like, because like just, I just have come up, I've lived my, most of my youth in rooms like that, because I started playing, gigs like, like professionally, quote unquote, when I was like 12 years old,
Mm-hmm.
I was hustling gigs at the Diedrich's Coffee House in San Juan Capistrano, California, and talked them into having me come in and play there on Friday nights or Saturday nights, But I think it was 2012, I had a guitar stolen from me at South by Southwest. And I came back to New York City, which is where I was living at the time, after it happened. And I went to see a singer named Anna Eggy, a really great folk singer, sing at the Rockwood Music Hall, which is a little tiny club, that holds about 100 people, in New York City on Houston Street, or on Allen Street, I guess, Houston and Allen. And so I'm watching Anna play, and her set ends, and I turn, and the owner of the venue, Ken Rockwood, is standing next to me, and he says, "Hey, man, can I talk to you for a second?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Would you mind coming up to my office?" And I said, "Not at all, man." So we walked upstairs and went into his office, and he said, "Man, I gotta say, like, I heard that your guitar got stolen at South by Southwest, and that just really bummed me out. And, I had this around my house, and I don't really play anymore, so I wanted you to have it." And he handed me a 1969 Gibson ES-335 guitar and gave it to me, because he heard that my guitar had gotten stolen, and I was a musician that played his club, and he just wanted to make sure that I had a guitar to play. These are the kind of people that own venues like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we should be supporting that, because like these guys are going out of their way, to make sure that this music can exist for people and always be a resource for them. Because, how many music fans do you know that would honestly say, like, music has saved my life? I think there's a lot of people that feel like that, and these people that own these little clubs like that, man, like they're doing, like all kinds of, crazy, like, sometimes heartbreaking, really difficult, things to keep these venues going and open, like just without there being a pandemic, So like, I really hope that people will get back out and support live music when we can again. But I really feel like they will, because I feel like, as great as the online streaming thing is, and as fun as some of those shows have been to watch, and it's been so cool to see how creative people have gotten. I mean, my friend Nicole Atkins here in Nashville has done some incredible live streams that really have blown me away with her creativity. But, I think, there's nothing like being in that room, with those people, at that show, and particularly when the conditions are kind of like what you're talking about, a little rowdier, a little sweatier, and a little more, electrifying. Like that's something that I think, we have to remember not to forget how that feels,
Right.
so that when it does come back, we can ensure that future generations can have that feeling too. Because for those of us who've had it, like, how special and ultimately like inspiring things like that are in your life.
Yeah. Like I think that if there's been one thing, it's not like that all of us have taken all of this for granted necessarily, but it has been eye-opening on, like, like the margins of keeping a live music venue open, or a a restaurant or anything like that are a lot slimmer than I think the average person actually realized. And, you know, a lot of these places are week to week, you know, and something that I didn't necessarily even think about until you realize a little bit later during all this is, you know, a lot of these venues, it's not like they're paying rent, you know, and it's not like they own that space. And rent for a venue is like, that's prime, like the reason why they want that spot is because it's prime real estate for the most part. And, you know, that can be expensive. And that's just things that we kind of all just kind of didn't even think about until, you know, these places are closed for 3 or 4 months at a time. And then, you know, there's been places, especially like here in Texas, obviously, like the rules are a little bit more lax than most of the country. And that means, like, you know, places were open for 25% capacity or 50% capacity. And I don't know if that's necessarily even, if you're able to survive off of that, if you're able to keep like the doors open off with that, even though you think it's better than nothing in this weird way. I don't know.
I know, man. That's the thing. Like, I just feel like it's so hard to tell, you know, and, you're just hoping, you know, that, you know, that things are going to work out. But, like, you know, there are people out there fighting for it. You know, I do have to give kudos, you know, to, you know, Frank Riley, who, you know, owns the booking agency that I'm fortunate to be working with, called High Road Touring, you know, who was instrumental in putting together the Save Our Stages campaign with NEVA and all that, and lobbying, you know, the government to, you know, pass pandemic relief, you know, that would be given to the music industry, you know. So there are people out there fighting, you know, on behalf of those folks, but it's a really tough fight. And it's one that fascinates me. Like, it's not a lot of people, but like it, you know, you see on occasion, like, somebody pop up on social media, you know, in response to, like, you know, musicians being out of work or whatever, and saying, you know, well, why don't they just, you know, go get a real job anyway, or something like that. I mean, people can be heartless, you know what I mean? Like, when it comes to this kind of stuff. So, you know, you know, on top of, you know, what we're already facing, like, makes me just have tremendous respect for a guy like Frank, who, you know, knows what he's up against, and, you know, is still willing to go out there and fight for us and try to make it happen. And it did happen, you know, so I feel confident that, you know, we'll be, you know, watching a James McMurtry show, you know, together, you know, at the very least in 2022.
Yeah. You know, what's that guy who does the whole, well, you know, why don't you get a real job, or why don't you, I think, like, the problem with that is, so whenever and I think this is natural for a lot of people, is like, you know, when you're younger, talking for myself, you know, I always thought that if you became a musician, if you were in a band, you know, you were either, I don't know, like your uncle who could play guitar and he did it, you know, after work at his house, just playing around like that, or you were, you know, George Strait, or you were like just at the top of the game, right? You're Shania Twain, right? And even though, like, if not necessarily, like, I guess at some point you realize, like, there's a lot of middle ground, and, like, that means a lot of times for musicians, that's great, because you realize, you know, I don't have to be, I don't have to, like, there's a lot of levels of success, you know what I mean? And you can make a living off of being a musician, and you don't have to be, you know, like the biggest rock and roll band of all time or something like that. So I think, like, what that means, though, is, like, for that person who thinks, you know, what are they complaining about? I think what it really means is that they think that all that middle ground, all these middle ground artists, which is basically everyone, right? That you guys are
Right.
all like
Yeah.
millionaires, and like, you know, it's
Right. Right.
the
Totally.
sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and like been watching, you know, every movie about just the excesses
Yeah.
of the music industry, I guess, you know.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true, man. I mean, it's definitely not, 1988, and we're definitely not Motley Crue. Like,
Right.
I can tell you that much. Like, it's I think many of us, have, pretty humble and simple lives. But you know what? Like, it's, the trade-off of that is a life in music, which is an incredibly rich and like interesting and like, fascinating, really, sort of existence, so, I guess it depends on where your priorities lie, and, mine just like, I can't wait, to see somebody, play a guitar solo again, honestly. I know people like Eric Clapton are, feel like the electric guitar is dead. Like, man, I cannot wait to go into a bar and hear somebody play a guitar solo. I'm stoked for it.
Yeah. That's also like one of those like, holy shit, like the Eric Clapton, Van Morrison kind of stuff, like their comments on all of this is he's like, you guys are the millionaires that I was just referencing. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
People should be mad at them, not me. Like, geez.
But yeah, I wanted to get out on this right here, and that is like, obviously, you moved to Nashville, and Nashville has always been like this, country music town. And of course, like there's this rich Americana scene there as well. And there's also like a lot of really great rock and roll. And I think that like people maybe don't realize just how diverse Nashville can be. And if you go in those pockets, you can find those people, right? Like Jack White lives there, for crying out loud, right? So like that kind of
totally.
I guess like before you moved there, did you realize like the richness of the diversity as far as styles of music? And when you first moved there, did you feel like any kind of pressure to fit into a certain kind of like Americana mold or anything like that?
That's a really cool question. Yeah, Thomas, when I first came to town, like my impression of Nashville was really more of an impression of East Nashville, to be quite honest. I don't think I even realized that, but I definitely was moving to town as a fan of Todd Snyder, and Chuck Mead, and Elizabeth Cook, and certainly, bands like Jason and the Scorchers and Bear Jr., for sure. But like, again, I never really thought of music in terms of genre myself. So like, it didn't, when I moved to town, and the popular thing to do at the time was like my friend Jerry Pentecost, who's an incredible drummer. And he ran this thing called Country and Western Night, which was just a night at the Five Spot where like everyone would sing classic country songs. I'm not a country singer, but I love Bobby Bear Sr. songs, and Shel Silverstein songs, and, Merle Haggard songs, and, all that kind of stuff, so I got up there and sang them too with everybody else, and that didn't feel weird to me at all, so I have like, community is a big part of like, music for me, like a sense of community and like, And that community is built through love of good music, whatever kind of music it is, So I will write a song with, Yola or, for my album, or one for her album, or, my friend AJ Haynes, from the Seratones, or, me and Lily Hyatt even tried writing a song together one time that we never finished, but I thought was really cool once she kind of started writing more of it. But I think all those people have totally different styles of what they do, but it never occurred to me that I should try to write with people who were more, I don't even know how I would do that. I'd have to when you put my thing down on paper, it's so bizarre, it's the strangest thing ever because, I met Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul and Mary when I was 16, which was the same year that I won, the Essentially Ellington competition Outstanding Guitarist Award, at Lincoln Center in New York City, which was adjudicated by Wynton Marsalis and Victor Goins, and of the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, and then, I got to New York and started a glam rock band, called 70 Precious Weapons, and then while I was getting that band going, I did a tour with this lady named Christina Train and ended up singing in Mark Cohn's band and played Carnegie Hall with Mark Cohn, who wrote Walkin' in Memphis.
Right.
I wouldn't even know how to find somebody to fit in with that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't even know where to look, and that's just scratching the surface of all the different kinds of music that I've been a part of doing, so, in that way, I am, able to go a lot of places with it. And so it didn't feel like a challenge for me to fit into East Nashville so much as it's just been a challenge to sort of get people to understand how I'm approaching music, which is not as a guy who's trying to constantly reinterpret, the same aesthetic over and over again. I'm approaching it as a songwriter, who's writing, songs in many styles, but music that I'm, educated in and have played for my entire life. It just happens to be that I've played a lot of different kinds of music.
Yeah. I kind of figured that it wasn't necessarily one of those things where you would feel oh, I need to fit in here because this is what happens here. But, I can definitely see that being the case for somebody as well. Because I think it's one of those things where, I've talked with people who have moved to Austin from out here in West Texas thinking, I need to go to Austin because it's going to be better for me. And then they get there and then they realize they have the idea of what Austin was versus what it is, if that makes sense. And sometimes it is one of those things where, just because you moved to a place doesn't mean you were going to fit in or that you were trying, maybe you were trying to fit in with that image of Austin versus
right.
Just being true to who you were,
Sure.
And I can see it's all part of it, I guess. I don't know. I'm rambling now, but.
Yeah, no. But I think that's true. It's a lot of people want to say oh, this person, found themselves or whatever, which I think is the case a lot of times, traditionally, sometimes singers do try a bunch of different kinds of styles and stuff like that. Just to see what works for them and what people respond to and whatever. But like what I've found as an artist is that people respond to all the different kinds of styles that I do. Like if you look at, even like on my Spotify page, like the top played songs, Little Movies is right up there next to Trouble with Drinking, which is right up there next to Up All Night, which is right up there next to Feminine Walk, so like, all of the different, things, that I've done, have been intentional, but people say like, well, why would you do that or whatever, and the answer is because I was moved by it, because it made me feel something, that I thought maybe someone else would feel.
Yeah. That's interesting about like the trying different things, trying to be a certain kind of artist, trying those different, for lack of a better term, trying on different outfits, styles.
Sure.
Early on, because I think sometimes like, it takes a minute to figure out maybe what lane or which way you want to go. Right. And I've heard like some people like, I guess, give other artists like a backlash or like, oh, they're not being, quote unquote authentic because like
sure.
Now they're doing whatever it is, now they're doing, they're trying to sound like they're from the 50s and they're dressing like, a cowboy and all that. And it's like, well, maybe like that was always a part of them, but like they didn't know how to get there until, like everyone goes through like these different phases growing up.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you're being realistic about it, the person that you are today is not the person that you're going to be 10 years from now, whether you like it or not,
Mm-hmm.
So there's also that, like, I'm also a person at this point who's been doing this for 20 years, so I've probably seem young to a lot of people, cause I really kind of didn't, nobody I think really knew that I was doing anything until I made Silver Tears in 2016 really. But, I have been, sort of crafting, this music like over a long period of time. So it's like, it's interesting to like see though, like some people do grasp that and like appreciate that about it. And then for other people's perception of it is that I'm sort of like, still experimenting or trying other things or whatever. So, I'm not so worried about that these days. I don't have any control over how anybody sees it. I just have to like feel happy with the work. And like when I, look at each record and particularly on this one, like I feel this way, like, I think these are, of the last, 2 years or whatever, like these are the best songs that I've wrote, during that time, for better or worse, so it's like, I'm much more interested now at like standing in the truth of that, whatever that is, than like, trying to imagine some scenario in which I could market myself into being perceived as, I don't even know what.
Right. Yeah. Like I always think of like the records should be kind of viewed as snapshots of that period. And,
sure.
Like they're never like, you mentioned it earlier about whenever you're playing live, like, you never play the same show twice and you never, like songs can be different versions and they can have, I guess like my point is like, a song doesn't, just because you recorded it this way doesn't mean it's like that forever. And just because like,
for sure,
and I think like people in general, fan bases just kind of always think of them as that because you kind of relate it to other mediums of like, if we're going to apply it for like a movie, like the next time you watch your favorite movie, you're not going to turn it on and then go, wait, they just replaced, Leo DiCaprio with Matthew McConaughey or something. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
you get,
Yeah,
I guess
totally.
like just my dumb analogy there, but yeah. Thank you so much as well. Yeah. I'll go and let you go, and we'll talk later sometime.
This honestly, dude, like this was so much fun. Like, thank you so much for having me and giving me a chance to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, that is it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the new record by Aaron Lee Tasjan out this Friday, February 5th. Go give our buddies a visit over at Desert Door, the Blue Light Live, and Hot Damn Coffee. Stop on over at the merch store and the Patreon. Subscribe to this podcast, New Slang, and my other podcast, The Neon Eon. And yeah, I'll see y'all Thursday for another episode.